Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission today, for you, the learner, is straightforward but immensely detailed. We're going to synthesize the recent, highly scrutinized reports about one of the largest strategic shifts happening right now in corporate America.
And we are, of course, talking about the Walt Disney Company.
Exactly.
We've been handed a really significant stack of commentary transcripts and financial analysis, and it all details a crucial move Disney has reportedly executed in its official, legally mandated business file.
And this really revolves around let's call it surgical removal of diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI terminology.
Right. And all of this is set against a very real backdrop of crushing financial pressure, shareholder threats, and a multi-year slide in their stocks.
Yeah, this is so much more than just, a simple PR adjustment or a change to an internal memo.
Yeah.
This is a public documentation pivot with real legal implications.
Mm-hmm.
So the central tension we're driving toward is this. Is this pivot a genuine fundamental change in corporate culture? A sign that Disney has finally recognized how much they alienated their core audience?
Or is it purely a reactionary, revenue-driven, and you could argue cynical?
Based on the immediate realization that for their foundational demographic, the ideological alignment they pursue translated directly into go woke, go broke.
It truly is the ultimate show me the money moment in modern corporate history. I mean, the sources we're analyzing frame this as a strategic retreat,
where Disney is quietly but definitively tucking away the progressive language they previously championed.
often to the detriment of their primary content offerings, as the analysis. We have to look at whether this shift is purely reactive to that massive shareholder anger and years of disappointment.
Performance that far, far outstrips the general market trend in the wrong direction.
Exactly.
And the initial concrete data point that really anchors this entire deep dive is found in their official corporate documentation.
Yeah.
This reported removal of DE other references in the official business report, well, it marks the first time such language has been dropped entirely, 2019.
Which covers a period of intense ideological commitment. Removing it now is a huge, undeniable indicator of a strategic...
Okay, let's unpack this with the specifics.
Let's start right with that document shift, because this is the hard evidence and it's, legally binding.
Right.
The source material draws our attention to the company's 2025 Form 10-K, which was filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission after their most recent Q4 meeting.
Okay, that's a great point. For our listeners who might not track corporate finance day to day, what makes the 10-K filing such a powerful signal? Why is this the smoking gun?
Well, the Form 10-K is the comprehensive annual report that a public company like Disney must file with the SEC. It's not a glossy, feel-good report for investors.
No marketing skill.
None. It's a legal doc. It's where the company details its financial performance, its structure, its risk, and its forward-looking strategy. And crucially, it's where they must disclose any factors that could materially impact the business.
So things like social trends, political risks, or even internal management priorities if they're big enough?
If they could affect the bottom line, yes. It's not a place for fluff. It's where you list things vital to the operation and risk profile.
Okay, so with that in mind, what did they find?
Well, this is it. When we look at this 2025 filing, the results, or I guess the lack of results, are indeed stunning. The words diversity, inclusion, DEI, or the full phrase diversity, equity, inclusion, appeared 0 times. Zero in that legally mandated corporate risk and strategy report. And this is not an oversight. It's a deliberate surgical removal of terminology that was, just a year prior, highly visible and considered a core corporate priority.
Because if you look at the immediate contrast, their 2024 SEC filing, that document included a dedicated section specifically titled and devoted to their strategy around DEI.
A whole section.
So that shift from a dedicated section to complete and utter silence in the 10K is monumental. You don't just lose an entire section on a material business topic by accident.
No, absolutely not. It represents what the analysts are calling a significant shift for a corporation that had previously featured these DEI sections, not only in those crucial legal reports, but also prominently, and I mean prominently, on their websites and in public goals.
So by removing it from the 10K, what are they telling the financial world?
They're essentially saying this is no longer a material risk, a material priority, or a required disclosure for our business operation. It signals a major deprioritization of the public acknowledgement of these concepts within their core corporate structure.
Now, here is a nuance that we have to address, because it could confuse people if they only glance at the document.
Right.
The word equity did appear in the 2025 report. It appeared around 130 times, which on the surface might sound like they kept some of the concepts.
That's a necessary clarification, and it really speaks to the precision of this corporate editing. The sources confirm that in every single one of those 130 instances, the term equity was used only in a strictly financial or legal context.
So we're talking about stockholders' equity, return on equity.
Exact. Establish financial terms, equity financing, or the valuation of property or assets. That's
So in other words, they didn't just drop the D in the I, they scrubbed the social definition of equity completely from the report.
precisely. They retained the language that is mandatory for corporate finance reporting, but stripped away the ideological definition related to social just hiring practice.
And that distinction just makes the removal of diversity and inclusion even starker, doesn't it?
It sends an unambiguous message to shareholders about where management's focus now lies.
And this policy shift cannot, it absolutely cannot be separated from the brutal financial reality the company was facing.
No, the reporting connects this public retreat directly to profoundly disappointing financial performance over the last several years. Their stock price, following yet another disappointing earnings result, was humbling.
Which always triggers the shareholder.
Always. Yeah. And the statistics cited in the analysis truly highlight the severity of Disney's decline relative to the broader market. This is where the pressure point is most.
Okay, give us the numbers.
The sources provide a really powerful comparative snapshot. Let's look at the market benchmark. Since March of 2021, the S&P 500,
which represents the general health of large American corporations.
Right. It has increased by approximately 71%. That is significant growth for the market as a whole.
Okay, 71% up for the market. And Disney.
In that exact same time frame, the 3.5 years where Disney was arguably at its most ideologically committed, Disney stock is down 46%.
Wow. That's not just failing to keep up. That is actively losing ground year after year. That differential is more than 100%.
It's a staggering underperformance that you just can't mask by saying the entire market is struggling.
Yeah.
It suggests Disney has fundamentally mismanaged investor expectations and failed to capitalize on its unparalleled intellectual property.
And the consensus view among the analysts, as reflected in the source, is that Disney has been on a significant losing streak.
And due to what are universally termed self-inflicted wounds that have severely damaged its brand prestige and, critically, its premium valuation.
And that valuation damage is what matters most to the corporate elite. Right? When a company is bleeding value like that, losing billions in potential market capitalization, it naturally brings immense aggressive shareholder pressure. We know they recently had a very close brush with a potential hostile takeover involving activist investors like Nelson Peltz.
And that is the ultimate catalyst for change. Peltz and others were openly questioning the leadership and the strategic direction. They were specifically pointing to management's focus on non-core issues.
Issues that they argue did not generate adequate financial return.
Exact. That threat of a hostile takeover, that existential question from powerful shareholders, provides the ultimate undeniable incentive for a rapid, reactive pivot like this.
So management has to prove unequivocally that they are focusing on revenue and shareholder value above all else.
When you are in that pressure cooker, facing the possibility of losing control of the company, the analysis suggests that any program that doesn't deliver a clear ROI,
especially those tied to an ideology that has alienated your customers,
becomes the first target for deep cuts. It's a pure business calculation, just disguised.
Okay, so let's move into unpacking the why. Why did this commitment to DEI language become such a financial liability? What does the analysis suggest Disney abandoned ideologically?
Well, that is the core argument driving this entire narrative. The sources claim that Disney's original appeal was rooted in being an unapologetically patriotic, completely uncontroversial film studio that made films with the broadest possible.
They transcended culture. They were for everyone.
That was the bedrock of the company's financial success for decades.
But the observed shift, the analysis argues, saw Disney move from that broad, inclusive entertainer to what the sources call a bastion of left-wing politics and ideology.
And this ideology, according to the critique, then infested every aspect of the business, moving far beyond just representation and casting and into core storytelling and, crucially, corporate policy.
This ideological shift wasn't just confined to the Hollywood studios, was it?
No, it was felt everywhere. Right down to basic, everyday customer service and the internal
I think I know what you're referring to.
The analysis points out that widely criticized corporate directive for cast members, the people working in the parks, to call visitors friends, instead of the traditional, universally accepted greeting, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
I remember that controversy. It seemed like a small thing to some, but for longtime park-goers, it was symptomatic of a much larger change.
It was perceived as more than just a preference. The sources argue it was seen as a microaggression against the traditional customer.
And the cumulative effect of these small, frictional operational changes just compounded the financial losses from the poorly performing content.
Exactly. And that audience, the traditional core audience, is overwhelmingly identified in the sources as middle America and middle-class families.
They are the bread and butter, the families who budget all year for those expensive trips to the park, the ones who buy the merchandise, who subscribe to the streaming service.
And the analysis states that the company has finally had to recognize that this core demographic effectively told them to go get lost by taking their discretionary spending somewhere else.
So the resulting strategic goal is, well, it's crystal clear, and it's entirely self-serving from a financial.
To pivot back to center, the entire purpose of this very public removal of DEI terminology is to try and encourage moms and dads and grandparents to spend their money with the company.
They're desperate to recover that massive lost revenue.
The stream that supports the entire ecosystem, from parks to consumer products.
We should also review the specific, highly publicized DEI initiatives that were reportedly dropped earlier in 2025, even before this 10K filing.
Yes, because this demonstrates the depth of the retreat. They weren't just dropping the broad term, they were dismantling named programs. Two prominent initiatives that were repeatedly referenced in previous years' reports were just gone.
The first being the Reimagine Tomorrow.
Yes, and this program gained some notoriety, according to the source material, during a 2022 internal meeting where an executive proudly bragged about her not-at-all secret gay agenda on the call.
Right. That moment was leaked publicly and became a huge flashpoint, didn't it?
Right.
It seemed to embody that perceived shift from entertainment to activism.
It absolutely did. The sources highlight that specific moment as being seen as, well, antithetical to the goal of broadest possible appeal, particularly among families.
When an executive appears to prioritize an internal political agenda over the general entertainment mandate, it just fuels the narrative that the company has been ideologically captured.
And the second major initiative dropped was the Disney look, which outlines specific dress code and presentation standards for cast members.
And that had been repeatedly cited in previous DEI efforts as part of their internal inclusion strategy.
Right. So the removal of these specific branded initiatives demonstrates a concerted, unambiguous effort to remove the evidence of the ideological alignment that shareholders and critics blamed for the financial decline.
It's a cleanup operation
Designed to reassure investors that management is focused strictly on maximizing profit, not pursuing social goals.
which speaks directly to the political wing argument. The observation made in the source is that Disney is simply going whichever way the wind blows.
They invested heavily in progressive alignment when it was fashionable in corporate circles, when it was seen as necessary for attracting certain demographics of employees.
But now, the sources argue, the corporate wind is apparently more conservative than they thought it was.
Or perhaps more accurately, the conservative audience is more financially punitive than they previously realized. And you have to consider the global business side of it.
Right.
Analysts cite the growing importance of business in regions like the Middle East, particularly with the opening of the Abu Dhabi park, where publicly championing progressive ideologies might create severe financial friction or risk.
Disney needs global neutrality to succeed there.
They do, and this all culminates in the financial cynicism argument that just permeates the analysis.
The core conclusion the reports draw is that this progressive pandering simply lacked any financial benefit whatsoever.
And in fact, created financial detriment. The cynical realization for corporate America, the source suggests, is that they need to be incentivized financially to do anything.
And when you look at it through the lens of a struggling business facing a 46% stock drop, the decision becomes purely rational.
Completely. The analysis states plainly that corporate entities operate on one profit. When there is no financial incentive, they are going to drop the program like a bad habit.
They just don't have the luxury of prioritizing non-revenue generating social goals when they're fighting off hostile takeovers.
But wait, let's challenge that cynicism for a moment. Is it possible that the pressure from shareholders, many of whom are traditional, large institutional investors or funds catering to conservative wealth, is itself a form of social alignment?
Interesting. So, are we sure the only motive is money? Or is it also pressure from large conservative investment funds demanding a different social profile?
That is an excellent point and a necessary distinction. However, the analysis frames it this way. The funds themselves are motivated by money. They are concerned with the performance of the stock.
I see.
So if a progressive stance costs the company 46% of its value while the market goes up 71%, then for the fund manager, the social cause is irrelevant. The financial failure is the only thing that matters.
So while the result aligns with a more conservative audience's preferences, the motive remains strictly transactional.
The source suggests that. They'll only put rainbow stuff out in June because they can monetize transactional limited time offering. When the transaction stops being profitable, the the public support stopped.
Which makes the shift from corporate policy to creative output so much more critical. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because we move from legal documentation to specific, visible decisions about content.
Yes, Section 4 provides concrete examples in creative decision-making that underscore this pivot. And we should start with content cutting at Pixar, which was often seen as the vanguard of Disney's progressive content.
Specifically, the analysis references Pixar's show Win or Lose. What were the details there?
Win or Lose was cited as a case where a previously planned storyline involving a trans character was ultimately cut from the final show.
So this is not just changing a logo. This is a very specific, deliberate editing choice to remove content that aligns explicitly with the very DEI language being drawn from the corporate reports.
It shows the corporate directive is cascading down.
But what is absolutely fascinating is what the analysis revealed was retained in the same show.
Yes.
While they cut that specific progressive storyline, a storyline featuring a Christian girl praying was kept in the final cut.
And this contrast is highlighted by analysts as a key strategic move. It is cited as a deliberate, visible action intended to re-engage that middle-class family demographic.
So by retaining a storyline centered on traditional Christian faith, something that might have been minimized or removed during the height of the DEI push, they're signaling a return.
A return to content that appeals broadly to middle America.
And it wasn't limited to Pixar. The sources also cite an entire episode that was cut from the children's show Moon Girl,
which suggests a broader company-wide review of content, a sort of ideological scrubbing to remove political or ideological themes that might alienate the core family audience. The goal is to make the content universally,
which means minimizing potentially controversial niche.
This is the operationalization of the pivot. It's one thing to remove words from a filing. It's another to edit content that has already been produced. It shows a real commitment.
Now, whenever a large cultural entity starts pivoting back toward what some might call traditional family values, they immediately face backlash from the audiences they previously courted.
Yes.
And we see this detailed in the analysis of the reaction to the Versus short.
The Versus short was reportedly a very personal story for the creator, dealing with the loss of a son and the emotional struggle of trying to conceive another baby.
It's a very traditional family theme.
Very. And this content, focused on traditional family struggles, grief, and hope, caused what the source terms a meltdown among some activist critics. They criticized it for promoting what they saw as outdated or exclusionary family norms.
However, the analysis provides a crucial counter-argument from the majority of comments responding to that backlash.
And that majority pointed out that Disney had already showcased other types of values in family structures, and that statistically, more people are traditional families than there aren't.
So the overwhelming sentiment was, why can't Disney make content for us too?
And that, right there, crystallizes the core conflict that drove the financial decline.
The internal activists, or this segment of the audience they were trying to appease, were pushing agendas that ultimately ended up excluding the core audience.
They were prioritizing niche appeal over mass, which is fundamentally disastrous for a business model predicated on selling tickets and toys to every family on the planet.
The source material suggests a fundamental misunderstanding internally among the management and creative.
Right. They were listening to people telling them that's where the money was going by chasing this new progressive audience, only to realize that was completely incorrect for their core business.
A model that relies on high-spending, middle-class families who buy season passes and multiple park tickets.
This leads directly to what the sources describe as the problem of gatekeeping. When criticism arose over the ideological shifts in content or policy, the source argues that those critics, the traditional paying customers, were often immediately labeled as bigots or reactionaries.
And that's a method of gatekeeping designed to silence opposition.
But the devastating result of that tactic, it drives away the paying customer, the middle-class families whose money Disney needs to survive. The idea described in the analysis is that these activists come in and they infest a business or a hobby, driving out the original customer.
While convincing corporate leaders that the original audience is aging out and must be replaced by a new audience.
But the critical realization is that this new audience, even if they exist, never comes with the spending power required.
Or crucially, they don't spend money on the core products.
They might be tourists or digital consumers who expect content for free, but they are not the stable, high-volume, repeat purchasers Disney relies on for its massive profitability. The data just didn't support the pivot.
And this isn't just a problem isolated to Disney. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this pattern of alienating core audiences is seen across the entertainment industry.
Oh yeah, let's look at some other industries mentioned in the analysis. The gaming industry offers one of the most detailed and financially painful parallels, specifically the Halo franchise.
Under Microsoft.
Right. Halo was traditionally described as a dude bro franchise, very masculine, rooted in a specific type of military sci-fi that appealed heavily to a young male demographic.
But the sources claim the shift saw it drastically transform. Under Microsoft's internal cultural push, the games, particularly Halo Infinite, were changed in ways that alienated the core audience.
Citing things like the introduction of rainbow Spartan armor and various pride flags being inserted prominently into the game's cosmetic options and marketing.
All under the umbrella of everybody's welcome to shoot the alien.
The result, according to the analysis, they alienated the core audience. The reports state that the brand is now totally damaged in the eyes of longtime fans, and that nobody gives a segue about Halo now in the way they did during its peak.
There was even anecdotal evidence cited from esports centers.
Yes, where despite having state-of-the-art machines ready specifically for Halo Infinite, nobody was playing it.
Instead, players chose established rivals or older, more beloved versions of the franchise.
They chose Fortnite, Dota, Call of Duty, or older, successful Halo titles like Reach or the Master Chief Collection.
And the crucial financial point here is the core audience myth. The new audience that was pandered to was simply not large enough to support the franchise financially.
Especially when the core fans, the ones who drove the franchise's identity and revenue, walked away.
And this misunderstanding persists because companies keep trying to pander to various demographics by making characters look like,
thinking that representation is the key driver of sales. But the real players, the ones who are already devoted to Halo, were playing it before, and frankly, didn't care about that.
They just liked the games because they offered compelling gameplay and strong narrative.
The source suggests that many people being pandered to are alienated by the perceived performative alignment, feeling like their identity is being used corporate cha-ching rather than being genuine respect.
Yeah, that makes sense. True fans understand that not everything's about having to be the same.
They just want high-quality entertainment that respects the original IP. When the quality drops in favor of ideological messaging, the money walks.
And this pattern is tragically echoed in the publishing world, specifically with comics,
an industry that has suffered enormous financial strain. The analysis suggests that the industry went after a super woke audience with content more akin to digital webcomic, drastically changing beloved characterization.
And the critical misjudgment there was entirely financial. The traditional comic industry model relies on dedicated collectors who buy physical media every week.
But the new audience that was pandered to often reads content for free, uses webcomic port, torrents the content. They are not reliable purchasers of $3, $4, or $5 physical comics.
So the devastating result for publishers, they chased off the people who would buy the physical comic books every single week.
They alienated the foundation for a new audience that wasn't willing to spend money on the product. It's the same financial pathology at Disney.
And we see corporate reaction not just in cutting content, but in personnel decisions in the gaming world as well.
The sources cite reports regarding Square Enix detailing that they have been firing employees in their California office, where most of those let go were reportedly pushing the far-left agenda.
So a corporate cleanup designed to remove the internal forces deemed responsible for confusing the creative mandate.
And ultimately alienating the paying customer base.
This entire section just summarizes a fundamental misunderstanding across multiple industries. The belief that audiences needed characters that look like them in every game or film,
when in reality, the core audience prioritized good, engaging content.
And the forced representation was often seen as companies using identity for financial gain, with the real result being the exclusion of the core audience.
And that brings us back squarely to Disney. If you're Bob Iger facing a 46% stock deficit, you look at every line item, every internal mandate, and every content choice through one lens. Did this make us money, or did this cost?
And the evidence in the 10K filing confirms the answer. It cost them money.
So in conclusion, this deep dive really highlights a reactive, financially necessitated move that transcends simple PR.
Right. The shift is an explicit, legally documented acknowledgement that progressive pandering,
whether through internal corporate programs like Reimagine Tomorrow or through content cuts in Pixar, had absolutely no financial benefit and actively cost Disney revenue by alienating its traditional high-spending family audience.
The middle America, they are now trying desperately to win back.
However, we must retain a degree of skepticism here. The move is so abrupt and, you could say, so cynical that observers wonder if the change is genuine.
Sure.
Some analysts believe that the DEI programs aren't truly gone. They are merely being renamed, rebranded, or conducted on the download without the public promotion.
So they won't be waving it under your noses and being like, look how diverse, progressive, and inclusive we are, guys.
Because that PR tactic failed. And that's the real tension move. Will this change be purely cosmetic, aimed at calming shareholders, or will it be a genuine commitment to returning to the principle of broadest possible appeal?
And the core demand from that alienated audience, according to the sources, is simple. Just stop.
Go back to being Disney. They want the uncontroversial, universally appealing so back.
But the pivot back to center, the analysis points out, has to address more than just the political content. If we connect this to the bigger picture of why middle-class families stop spending, there's a huge missing piece in the recovery strategy.
Affordability.
Exactly.
That's a crucial detail that is often overlooked in the ideological discussion. The sources cite massive, repeated price hikes across the country, particularly in the park, which are the primary driver of the family.
And the result of these hikes has been what analysts call record profits per customer.
Meaning they are making more money per person visits or buys their product, but they are simultaneously serving fewer customers.
That's a devastating equation for a company like Disney that relies on volume and breadth of appeal to survive. They're sacrificing market share for margin,
Which might satisfy short-term investors, but damages the brand's long-term accessibility and relationship with the middle-class family.
So Disney needs to strike a crucial balance. To truly win back middle-class families, they must address both the content appeal,
Getting rid of the ideological push that drives customers away,
and making their parks and products financially affordable again to welcome back the segment of the audience that was just priced out.
If they don't solve the affordability crisis, the money won't follow, no matter how politically neutral their films become.
So we wrap up with a final provocative thought for you to consider. The learner, as you synthesize these reports. The source material frames this entire pivot. The 10K removal, the content cuts, the abandonment of the woke terminology as a purely reactive financial necessity.
Driven solely by tanking stock performance and the severe threat of shareholder up.
So considering this laser focus on the bottom line, if Disney's stock price had remained stable, or had even continued to increase relative to the S&P since 2021, would there have ever been a significant public incentive or even a viable business justification to stop the progressive alignment?
This raises the fundamental question of whether a free market system where fiduciary duty is paramount can ever truly support non-financially incentivized social causes on a corporate level without eventually risking the financial stability of the entire enterprise when that alignment fails to translate into profit.
It seems that when ideology clashes with the bottom line, always something for you to mull on as you continue your own deep dive into the corporate land.